One Question is designed to give subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to One Question. Our guest today is Stevie Baker-Watson. Stevie is the Director of Athletics at DePauw University. Greetings, Stevie. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ty.
Now, Steve, you've been the athletics director there at DePauw since 2012. And as you mentioned before we started recording, that you're right on your 6th-year anniversary. That is a wonderful thing for everyone to celebrate.
Thank you.
Now, your time there and prior to, I met you years ago on a committee. You served on multiple committees, roughly a dozen different committees and meeting groups and councils and advisory boards in terms of college athletics and helping to make what we know of college athletics great. So I would like to say, and I don't know if you agree, that you are probably an expert on group dynamics and productivity. Would you say that?
I have certainly seen a lot of groups that function well, and just as many groups probably that don't function as well. And I've tried to use those as learning opportunities for myself, both in those committee appointments that you referenced and in my current role. So I've seen a lot.
Okay. Well, good. Well, that's what we want to talk about. The first question I have for you, Stevie, is especially now in your leadership role, what are the differences between high-functioning groups that you've seen and those that are not as efficient at getting things done? And I'd imagine, before you answer, I'd imagine that communication has a lot to do with it.
Absolutely. You know, I think for me, there's everything that I look at is on a continuum. It's not all one thing or nothing of something else. It's, you know, some folks do some things better, like communication, but the folks that I've worked with and the groups that I've worked with that have been really successful know how to communicate with each other. And they know how to do that via email. They know how to do it via phone. But I have to be honest, they have the ability to communicate in person. And over the years, as we've relied more upon technology, I think that's a skill that folks haven't focused on as much. And so, you know, for me, the high-functioning teams in terms of communication are ones that are willing to talk to each other, not through electronic communication, in order to figure out what's going on with their programs. You know, the high-functioning groups for me that I've worked with have a clearly defined outcome or goal or prize, as I like to say, and that they keep their eye on the prize. They know what they are trying to accomplish. And so those groups that I have worked with make sure that their mission and goals and values are always at the forefront of what they're trying to do.
You touched on purpose, right? They know why. Why do we do what we do? Why are we meeting, and what is our purpose of being here?
They have a high level of accountability to themselves, and they're committed to the team and doing the work at hand. I choose to be engaged in a lot of committees and am highly engaged because I like to learn, and I always have that in the back of my head that I am there to help contribute. I'm not there to sit on the sidelines for that. And the high-functioning groups, I think, also have a high level of trust amongst their team, and that when you leave a meeting and there are 5 different tasks that different folks are going to contribute, you have a high level of trust that when you come back to your next check-in meeting, that those people are actually going to accomplish those goals for you. For us, the high-functioning team, it's a balance between having a level of personal independence and at the same time being dependent upon each other, asking for help when you need it, because I think those teams that aren't efficient, those are the ones where everybody just sort of stays in their silo. They don't ask for help. They don't see windows of opportunity. They're very fixed mindset in terms of what they want to do. So for me, it's how do I make sure that it's not me over we, but I remind people that there is no I in team and that we all need to work together towards our goals.
So there's a balance in both. In your experience, what methods have you seen or used to restore cohesiveness and productivity to a group that may be dysfunctional because of a lack of communication or for whatever reason? How have you seen somebody or maybe a team pull back together after maybe splintering?
Well, I think the first part of that is acknowledging that there's actually a problem. I think sometimes we think all that glitters is gold, and we get very caught up in the shiny things in our jobs. And so I think the first thing is recognizing that you've got some dysfunction and figuring out where that stems from. For me, when I came to DePauw, we had pockets of transition, we had pockets of rebound, we had pockets of things that just weren't working. And once we figured that out, we realized that we needed to be very transparent, one, about what our goals and our values and our mission statements were, but really we needed to be transparent about the problems that we were going to face. One of the things that I had started when I first came to DePauw was a leadership roundtable that consisted of all of our head coaches and directors in our department. So sports medicine came to the table, athletics communications, the 2 assistant athletic directors that were with me on the administrative team, is that we all came together, and I was transparent with them about what was going on at the university and the challenges we were facing, because there was a lot of knowledge in the room. And for me, that was a way to get over this dysfunction for them of some feeling like they weren't being heard or feeling like they were being siloed. And we really started to do a lot of things together, and a lot of that started with problem solving. One of the funny story, I thought it was funny, I'm not sure anybody listening will think it was funny, but I had been at DePauw for maybe about 2 months, and I came back. I was traveling and commuting back from Chicago at the time, and I came down and I had brought folks Portillo's Italian beef. And Portillo's is known in the Chicagoland area, and I was super excited. And, you know, I've got 3 or 4 crock pots out on the table, and I'm cooking beef, and I'm serving lunch to people. And one of the coaches said to me, who had been there for at least 7 years at that point, said, you know, we've never actually sat down and had a meal together. And I was like, really? And it wasn't so much about, you know, a social opportunity, right? Like the coaches needed to go out after work, but they needed to actually sit down and talk to each other without having an agenda, to be quite honest. And that was one of the things that we started doing in our department a lot, of finding ways to just informally come together so we had that baseline level of communication with each other, because then it made the hard conversations so much better, so much easier for us to have in that. So, you know, the other thing that we talked a lot about doing with our team when they weren't as functional as they needed to be is we needed to remind people that it's not personal. We're all going after the same goals and objectives. We want to have a competitive program. We want our student athletes to have an outstanding experience. We want to have good work-life balance, and we want to protect the DePauw brand. But we needed to do that and make decisions with those values in mind, not what's in it for me type of thing. And so that helped us move, I think, from being dysfunctional to a fairly high-functioning group right now.
All right. You mentioned 2 or 3 actually excellent tidbits there. You mentioned that acknowledging that there is a problem here, and then you transitioned to acknowledging that, hey, we're all on the same team, so let's act like we know each other, or let's get to know each other so that we can move forward in the problem we just acknowledged. That's excellent information. How has the service you've done and the service you do helped you throughout your career? I mean, I imagine you were coming up, you probably were on a lot of things, involved with a whole lot, and then you had to be selective as your career enhanced. How has the things changed and also helped you throughout your career with this involvement in committees and meetings?
Yeah, early on, I said yes to a lot because I wanted to learn. I got my roots in athletic training and spent 10 years as a clinical athletic trainer at the small college level and loved it, but also found that folks just looked at my title and put me in a box and didn't see all these other great things that I could contribute. So for me, as I got involved, you know, there was a lot of listening and there was a lot of observation. I'm that person that will sit in the back or sit in the middle, and I may not peep up the entire time in a meeting, but I'm watching how everybody responds. So that's where, when we talk about group dynamics, I saw some really great people facilitate meetings and move a group towards their goals and have outcomes and really feel like when you got to the end, you had accomplished something, you knew what your next steps were, you knew how it was going to impact the bigger picture with things. And then I sat through some meetings where I felt like I was being talked to and talked at and presented to. And I was only there to sort of just, I don't know, blindly endorse what was going on. And I realized that in my own shoes, those were the meetings I wasn't engaged in. I wanted to step back. And it was really harder for me that when those committees would report out and someone would say to me, hey, you're on that committee. Can you tell me more about this decision that you all just made? I really didn't have much to give in that scenario. So for me, I was able to see who did things well, who didn't, and then I was able to translate that back to my own departments and the people that I worked with and say, yeah, I don't need to talk at them. Really what I need to do is throw a question out to them and wait for them to answer, because I work with a lot of smart people and they have a lot of great ideas. For me, being on committees, it was excellent for me being able to hear from people who have a lot of diverse experiences that I didn't necessarily know, I didn't necessarily consider. It humanized some things for me that just made me love the work that I do even more for them. And I think that, when I think about folks who are trying to get into the business, I encourage them to get involved with committees. I encourage them to say yes. I encourage them to offer their services to somebody, but do it for the right reasons. Do it because you are passionate about the topic at hand or passionate about the project. Don't just do it so you can get a committee appointment written on your resume. The folks that sit around you will know that you're not engaged, and they will pull back from you. So go after it and go 2 feet in.
Now, along those lines, it's excellent advice for a young professional coming up through the ranks and during their career enhancement phase, right? Well, what if they get appointed to a committee that they're not necessarily, that's not their first passion, something they're necessarily engaged in, but this is the committee they're appointed to as they are moving up the ranks? How should they function there based on what you just said?
Well, I think there's 2 sides of this coin. Is that one, you shouldn't put yourself out there and volunteer for things unless you're willing to be part of that team. So that's one thing. I think sometimes, again, folks throw their name into things and they're just not, you're not interested and you're just looking to put something on your resume. Don't put yourself in that position. For those, though, that are interested in committee service and get put on a committee that they're not really sure what it's about or it's not their passion, there's so many other things that they can learn about when they're on that committee that's beyond the content. And more than likely, if there's a committee formed for it, more than likely, not all the time, but more than likely, there's already been a demonstrated need. And so it allows you then to develop content knowledge to be able to take it back to your institution, take it back to your conference. But for me, for folks who aren't in there, learn how to lead a meeting. There are so many folks that I know that are really, really smart, but they can't guide a group. They have the content knowledge, but they don't know how to facilitate. They don't know how to ask questions. They don't know how to make it interesting and engage the people that are there. Take notes on how people choose to engage and how they don't for things. Speak up when you have the ability to do so. I always say in a respectful and a tactful kind of way, but speak up when maybe there is a portion of that committee service that you're really good at, and maybe you're really great at social media and your group wants to make more of a presence in that area. Get engaged in that kind of way so that way you can actually say that you've contributed to your committee. You just didn't sit on the committee.
All right. Well, Stevie, this is excellent information. I think there are some things that people can take away from this in terms of group dynamics, and especially coming from you who have served on and with some pretty influential groups. So I definitely want to say thank you and tell you that we appreciate you joining us today on One Question.
Thank you, Ty, for having me here.
That was Stevie Baker-Watson. She's the Director of Athletics at DePauw University. And actually, this is the day after her 6th-year anniversary. So congratulations also for that, Stevie. And this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of One Question is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.